Why can a creature capable of extinguishing lives in an instant have moments of pure childlike joy? What if the key to understanding terror lies in its fragmented psyche? Prepare to see Majin Boo from a new perspective, exploring the depths of his mind. At the dawn of the Dragon Ball Z universe, the wizard Bibidi didn't just conjure a creature. He molded a singular destructive force, Majin Boo. Boo's genesis in itself is a fascinating starting point for any psychological analysis. He wasn't born, in the biological sense, but was created through dark magic and malevolent intent, which radically distinguishes him from traditional conceptions of personality development. His magical origin cast him into a state of constant malleability, lacking the ego or superego foundations that form in human childhood, or the experiences that build an individual's identity. The chaotic environment of his creation, immersed in volatile magic and geared towards annihilation, planted the seeds of his intrinsic instability. From the beginning, Boo manifests a psyche deeply influenced by his magical nature and the purpose of his existence, oscillating between destructive obedience and moments of an almost existential emptiness. This primary duality isn't an acquired conflict, but rather an inherent characteristic that sets the stage for his future transformations and disconcerting behaviors. The lack of a cohesive self from his conception seems to have prevented the development of emotional regulation mechanisms and a stable identity. He was, in essence, a tool, but a tool with a power and an absorption capacity that would forever alter his original programming. There was, however, something intrinsic to his very magical essence that no one foresaw: his ability to be shaped, for better or worse, by those he absorbed, making him a true mirror of external influences. This absence of a psychic center of gravity made him a perfect receptacle for chaos. Majin Boo's long period of imprisonment, encapsulated by Bibidi and later by Bibidi, represented a crucial point for the evolution of his psyche. Although inactive, the deprivation of his original destructive purpose and the contact, even if indirect, with the universe's energies, initiated a process of internal schism. The major turning point, however, was the absorption of Dai Kaioshin, the benevolent leader of the Kaioshians. This event wasn't just an addition of power or a change in form. It was an infusion of compassion and innocence that violently collided with Boo's original destructive nature, like oil and water attempting to mix. This contact with such pure goodness acted as a trauma to his psychic integrity, triggering an internal struggle that manifested in his different forms and personalities. The well-known Fat Boo is a direct reflection of this fusion. The relentless cruelty, inherent to his original essence, softened by the naivety, the love for sweets, and the capacity for remorse, traits from Dai Kaioshin. This duality, which makes him unpredictable, reveals a mind in constant conflict. Modern psychological science could describe this phenomenon as a type of complex dissociative disorder, where different aspects of the psyche emerge as separate entities or alter egos in response to extreme stress or trauma. In Boo's case, the trauma was the forced introduction of a morality and sensibility that were alien to his nature, creating an overlapping of identities. This fragmentation allowed him to adapt, albeit chaotically, to new influences, but also prevented him from having a cohesive identity. And it was there, in the silence of his imprisonment and the complexity of his first absorption, that the cracks in his psyche began to deepen, paving the way for the emergence of new and more dangerous forms, each reflecting a part of this internal conflict. Majin Boo's various forms aren't mere physical transformations. They are direct reflections of his psychic instability and the influences that shape him. Fat Boo, with his childlike innocence and almost obsessive desire for sweets, represents the residual yet powerful influence of the kind Dai Kaioshin. He's capable of unexpected acts of kindness, like healing the blind or playing with dogs, but also of childish outbursts of rage when thwarted, demonstrating the coexistence of contradictory impulses. His mind, at this stage, is like that of a superpowered child, impulsive, egocentric, but with flashes of innocence. On the other hand, Super Boo, who emerges when Fat Boo's evil part separates and consumes the good one, is a personification of pure cruelty and a Machiavellian intelligence. This leaner, more menacing form exhibits a more strategic mind and a sadistic sense of humor. His actions aren't just impulsive. There's a cold calculation, a pleasure in annihilation and manipulation. He doesn't just seek to destroy, but to inflict torment and humiliation. When he absorbs other beings, like Gotenks, Piccolo, or Gohan, his appearance and abilities change again. But what's most intriguing is how his personality also shifts, incorporating traits and intelligence from his victims. He gains Piccolo's cunning, Gotenks' arrogance, Gohan's strength, but everything is subverted by his own primarily destructive nature. This chameleonic psychic nature can be analyzed through concepts of projective identification, where he internalizes aspects of others, or as an extreme form of behavioral adaptation, where his very existence seems to depend on assimilating what surrounds him. Each transformation reveals a different facet of his fragmented psyche, exposing a unique and, at times, diametrically opposed way of thinking. His seemingly random actions follow an internal logic linked to his momentary identity and the desires that drive it. We can draw parallels with studies on the influence of environment and experiences on personality formation, where traumas and the absorption of new identities lead to distinct and complex behavioral manifestations. But the true potential of his complex psyche and his ability to transcend simple malice to become a strategic terror remained hidden, awaiting the next act of absorption to reveal and refine itself. Majin Boo's ability to switch between childlike innocence and ruthless brutality raises profound questions about the nature of morality and ethics. His destructive actions don't seem to be motivated by conscious malice or a traditional plan of domination, like other villains. Instead, they are driven by momentary impulses and the pursuit of immediate gratification. He might want candy one second and the next, turn an entire city into chocolate, with no apparent remorse or understanding of the consequences of his actions. There's no internal moral code guiding his choices. He doesn't seem to operate with the same notions of right or wrong as human beings. His worldview is shaped by his immediate needs and desires, devoid of a sense of responsibility or consideration for life. This is the essence of the point of no return for Boo. He operates on an existential plane where notions of right and wrong, of life and deactivation, are fluid and depend exclusively on his momentary mental state. He doesn't feel guilty about annihilating, because for him, annihilation is an act as natural as eating or playing. By absorbing other beings, he not only acquires their abilities, but also assimilates fragments of their personalities and tendencies, becoming a chaotic amalgam of different psyches in conflict. Piccolo's intelligence, Vegeta's arrogance, Gohan's strength, all are incorporated, but without a moral structure to coalesce these traits. We could argue that Boo operates at a premoral stage, where notions of right and wrong are fluid and dependent on his momentary mental state, similar to a young child who hasn't fully developed empathy or an understanding of long-term consequences. He didn't transgress morality, he simply doesn't comprehend it. His horror lies precisely in this absence of intentional malice, for what has no intention cannot be deterred. What if this very absence of a fixed moral code was the true face of terror, a horror that cannot be understood by human logic, leaving us powerless before his unpredictability? Analyzing Majin Boo's behavior through a psychological lens, we can observe patterns that resemble certain disorders related to impulse control and emotional instability. His incessant search for stimuli, whether food, games, or destruction, his explosive rage, and his inability to foresee or care about the consequences of his actions fit a profile of a typical psychic functioning. He demonstrates a profound lack of empathy, an inability to put himself in another's shoes and to understand the pain or suffering he causes, viewing living beings more as objects of interaction or sources of energy than as individuals with feelings. The absorption of other beings can be seen not only as a quest for power, but as a dysfunctional attempt to integrate different aspects of his own fragmented identity, or even to obtain new ways of interacting with the world that he cannot process otherwise. It's as if, by consuming others, he tries to fill an existential void or to understand himself through the identities of others, becoming a patchwork of personalities. Studies on the influence of early trauma and chaotic environments on personality development can offer insights into the genesis of his instability and his propensity for destruction, even if his magical origin is a unique factor. Comparatively, his behavior might echo certain characteristics of antisocial personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, although his magical nature elevates him to a unique level where destructiveness isn't a choice, but an inherent manifestation. He isn't insane in the human sense. He operates under his own logic, where destruction is as natural as creation, and the pain of others is irrelevant, almost like a function. It wasn't simply malevolence. It was the manifestation of a fundamentally dysregulated psyche, operating on a plane beyond human comprehension, where annihilation is a mere byproduct of his search for satisfaction. Even after his eventual defeat and the separation of his evil forms, Majin Boo's legacy endures and shapes the Dragon Ball universe. The experience of his chaotic and destructive existence profoundly impacted the characters around him, forcing them to confront the nature of good and evil, the fragility of life, and the importance of compassion and self-control. He became a catalyst for the growth of figures like Vegeta, who was confronted with the truth of his own arrogance by observing Boo's simplicity and untamed power, realizing that true strength isn't just about raw power. The most notable development of his legacy, however, is the transformation of the remaining fat, Boo. Through continuous contact with Mr. Satan and the experience of an existence devoid of his evil counterpart, this form of Boo begins to develop a sense of morality, empathy, and even responsibility. He becomes a protector, a loyal friend, and a remarkable example of how the positive influence of genuine human contact can redeem a psyche once unstable and purely destructive. This coexistence demonstrates that environment and social relationships can have a transformative impact, even on beings with the most chaotic origins. We can reflect on how individuals with histories of disruptive or traumatic behavior can, through positive relationships and experiences, develop a sense of purpose, morality, and belonging, finding a new place in the world. This redemption of Boo is proof that even the most chaotic creatures can find a path to coexistence, and that the capacity for change lies in meaningful interactions. But was the seed of instability completely eradicated, or does it lie dormant, ready to awaken in a new cycle, perhaps in another form at another time, proving that chaos is a persistent force in the universe? Majin Buu Saga invites us to question the complexity of the psyche and the thin line between innocence and destruction. His dark story reminds us that behind apparent chaos, fragments of humanity may be waiting to be discovered. And perhaps, in the end, the true threat lies not in the most powerful form, but in the unpredictability and instability of the essence itself. What else hides in the mind of one who can be everything and nothing?